Hi knitters, welcome to episode 73 of the Knitty McPurly podcast. I am Devin Bentry. You can find my website at knittymcpurly.com. If you want to email me, I am Devin at knittymcpurly.com. And I'm Knitty McPurly over on Instagram. How's everybody doing today? It's Friday. We had such good weather this week. It was a little rainy, but it was not so cold, and that was really nice. We got out a little bit. Whew. Some people really need to get out. There was a giveaway last week. Anyone who entered a comment under last week's podcast was entered to win the hand and lip balm and Murdog card and Murdog sticker small gift package. So I've revved up the random number generator and the winner is Kristyn Michele. Congratulations, Kristyn. I will be in touch with you I'll probably put a comment under your comment from the last episode. But feel free to email me, or if you're just, hearing this, email me or DM me on Instagram and I will get your prize mailed out to you. Yay. Okay, progress and shop news. Let's start with shop news. First thing is I have a very beautiful, very lonely skein left in my shop. Look how pretty she is. She's so pretty. Why didn't anybody ask her to the dance? Oh, this is the last skein left. It is Florence fingering weight. It's 100% superwash merino, single ply, 100 grams, 415 yards. This would be a great skein for, any fingering weight project. Probably not socks because it is a single ply, but it would be good for a cowl or a shawl, and it's just such a beautiful color. This color is called Titian Light. Titian is a color that I really, really like. I'm currently totally out of yarn in my shop right now, which is kind of exciting, except for this little guy. Somebody buy me. I'm so sad. Anyway, this will not last long now that I've said that. And look, it even matches my cup. Oh my gosh, it's so pretty. So anyway, this is left. It's the last for sale. It's the last sale skein, 25% off in the shop. Go get her. Let her know that she's loved, even though nobody asked her first to the dance. Okay, another thing that I have is needle cases, tapestry needles. So in the past, I had tapestry needles in my shop that look like this, and they were very, very pretty. I liked them a lot. The downside to these needle cases was that both the case and the needles were made in China. I had a lot of trouble getting them. Getting things from China has been hard in the past couple of years. But also just, I don't have anything in my shop that I am selling as a product that comes from China as best I can. I am trying to get every piece of Chinese stuff out of my store because I want everything to be made in countries that I know do not have slave labor, because it's the scourge of the modern world. I don't know how we live in a world that has slave labor and that we're just okay with it. So not in my shop anyway. So I now have made in the USA. Oh my gosh, they're adorable. They're just so adorable. These are 100% made in the USA, and this color is like a pale peachy pink. So my husband was like, where's the contrast? But I kind of like low contrast. That's just me. So the bottom part is pink and the top part is natural wood. So the top just comes right off. It just pops off like that. And then there are 3 tapestry needles in there. They are size 18 needles. So they're not the huge, let me try and hold it up so you can see. It's not the gigantic yarn needle. I personally like a smaller embroidery needle with a dull point, not a sharp point. But these are the kind of needles that I particularly appreciate. These are made in France. And as a result, they are very nicely machined. When I got the ones from China, I would often get ones that were like they had just taken some sort of a rod and just chopped it up and drilled a hole in it. So sometimes they weren't even pointy on one end, they would just be flat. So these are really nicely machined needles from France. And the case is 100% made, finished, etc. in the US. So these are not in the shop yet, but they will be soon. If you're not watching this right on Friday, then you may be able to go find these in the shop if you're watching it later. But these are adorable. I just think that they are so cute. And I will be having different colors come in and out. Right now I've got this pink, but I just love them. You're not gonna find these anywhere else. I alone have these. So I like having things that nobody else has. So needle cases, just one more thing to add to your little notions pouch in your knitting bag. Those are in the shop. Let me see what else. Okay, in terms of my progress, I made a little bit of progress on my Hepburn sweater. A lot of you had great suggestions for what I ought to call the sweater. And I watched Roman Holiday. On Sundays, we have this thing where all week the kids kind of want a part of mom. And I am torn in many directions. I spend a lot of time driving one kid to school, and I spend a lot of time homeschooling, and I spend a lot of time working, and I spend a lot of time cleaning. And so for me to sit with children, I just don't really have a lot of time for that. But on Sundays, we go to early mass. We go to 6:30 a.m. mass. And the nice thing about that is you get home and you have the whole day. And so one of our traditions is we eat donuts, and then we sit on the couch and watch a movie. And last Sunday's movie was Roman Holiday, which was really good. I really enjoyed that movie. If you haven't seen it, I recommend it. It's hard to find on streaming. I had to download a new app to stream it on my Roku. But this movie was made in either 1953 or 1954. Can't remember which, but it's black and white. And what was really interesting about this movie, I don't know if is it a spoiler if I'm talking about a movie that's 70 years old? I'm just gonna go ahead and give you the general gist of the movie so I can tell the story. Audrey Hepburn is a princess, and it's a story kind of like the Aladdin story, where the princess goes out into the streets and she meets this kind of regular guy, and he doesn't know that she's the princess. And over time, they kind of figure this out, and they end up, in the end, kind of falling in love. But in the end, the princess, she has a duty to her family and her country. And so she goes back to being the princess, even though she still loves this regular guy. They can't be together in the end. And I loved the sacrificial aspect of that, because that's what love is. Love is sacrifice. And if you are talking about love in a way that has no sacrifice, then it's not love. So what I thought was really interesting was my teenagers' response to this movie, because their response was like, "What? He didn't get the girl in the end? Like it's a bummer ending." And I'm like, "No, it's a sacrificial ending." But no movies nowadays are that way. No movies end with sacrificial love. So it's a good movie. It's a good movie to watch with teenagers. I admit my younger kids kind of wandered off, and they'll watch stuff in black and white. It's not just because it was in black and white, but it was just not fast moving enough for them, I guess. But it was a great movie. But I decided not to use any references from that movie because my Hepburn sweater does not appear in that movie. It's much more of a Holly Golightly sweater. But I also loved Hepburn because of Katharine Hepburn too. Are they related? They are, I feel like cousins or something. I can't remember. I know some of you are shouting it at the screen right now. So I made some progress on that. I'm not going to show it right now because I left it downstairs and the progress is just not that exciting. It's just like some more of a stockinette sleeve. So another thing that happened is I got the rights back to the cotton candy mittens, and those are available for free on my website. I think I mentioned that last time. But what I did differently this time is I have a tab on my website dedicated to free patterns. You don't have to look through all my patterns to find the free ones. I would like to have a larger catalog of free patterns, and I'm working on one right now, which I'll show in a sec. So right now I have 3 patterns on my website that are free, and you can go right to the free patterns tab and download those if you want to, if you don't have them. I'll go ahead and show this one that I'm working on right now. This is going to become a free pattern. This is my DK sock that I'm working on, and I'm going to put in an afterthought heel right about here. I want to have kits for this, and it's going to take about, to make 2 socks, it's going to take 25 grams of these 3 colors and about 50 grams of this color, I think, to make the 2 socks. But the heels and toes will be in this color. I just liked these together. I just thought this was a cool combination. So this is a very super simple DK sock pattern that will show up in my free patterns probably in about a month, once I have time to get it written and test knit and tech edited and all that stuff. So I dyed these colors and I just had so much fun. I just think they look so good together, don't they? I don't know why. I've long appreciated these two together. Kind of a, this is kind of a rose gold. In the past, I have used kind of like a honey, looks really good with it, with like a teal. But this rose gold color, I just love. This is my current favorite color right now. And I love it with this teal, and then I have it with a black and a white. And these are gonna be in a kit that you can purchase from me if you want to make this exact sock, but you can use any DK yarn that you want. You can use scraps if you want. So you'll only need about half a ball of this color and about a quarter ball for both socks to make this part. So including the heels and toes. So that'll be coming soon. That'll be another free pattern for that tab. And I just like that. Like I like being able to offer things for free. That's always nice. So also the retreat planning, I have outsourced my class schedule, and I have a person who basically has agreed to do that. And I haven't given her any information on it because I'm just not quite there yet. I plan to outsource the vendors. So I will have someone else managing this for me. Now, in April, my husband and I are celebrating our 20-year wedding anniversary, and our little getaway is going to be at Lake Junaluska, where the retreat is going to be happening. So I'm going to be able to check it out at that time, and I will hopefully be posting some pictures and videos so you can see it and everything. And that's going to be really, really cool. I can't wait. I'm really excited. This is our low budget. We have big kids now who are more expensive than they were at our 10-year anniversary when we went to, where did we go? St. Thomas. St. Thomas? I think we went to St. Thomas. Hi, Gigi. Okay. This is my sock drawer.
Bye.
Bye.
Maggie and me are going to go for a walk.
Yes,
we'll be back
awesome.
in like 40 minutes in time to go to Mass.
Dad's still here?
Rocky?
I don't know where Rocky is.
Oh,
okay,
great.
bye. Okay, so after that time, I think because it's our anniversary is April 20th. So that week we will be in Lake Junaluska checking everything out, and I will be talking with the lady there who's in charge of like having everything organized on their end. So after that, I will have details for these 2 ladies who are going to be helping me with these with the classes and the vendors. So that's happening. Okay, word of the week. I had a special request for this word of the week. Before I do that, let me just talk about the sweater that I'm wearing. This is my Watership sweater. This one is knit in Brooklyn Tweed Loft, which is a fingering weight yarn, and it has a very detailed yoke. And this sweater comes with directions for either short sleeves or long sleeves. I have one of each. But this sweater is nice and long. It offers a lot of coverage. And I'm wearing my Josephine stitch marker necklace in silver. Both of these things are available on my website. Okay, moving on to our word of the week, which is brioche. This came by a request. And this was a really interesting rabbit hole for me to go down because I did not know why the word for a kind of bread was used to apply to brioche. I've heard people talk about it like they knew. And so I kind of had some vague ideas in my mind. I kind of figured because brioche is a kind of bread that's made with eggs and milk. Not all bread is made with eggs and milk, so it makes it almost like a sweeter, pastry-like bread. So in my mind, I'm thinking, well, that's kind of a fluffy, delicious bread, and brioche as a knit stitch is kind of a fluffy, delicious knitting stitch. I'll put some pictures up here so you can see, because I do have some non-knitters who watch this podcast, what a brioche stitch is. So I went down this rabbit hole and I kept kind of uncovering more and more layers of this onion until I got down to what I think is the actual reason why brioche bread and brioche stitch go together. Brioche creates a fabric that is double thick because you work every row twice. It's worked with a series of yarn overs and knit two togethers. So Wikipedia shows, without any source citing, that brioche knitting originated in the Middle East. I didn't find anything to substantiate that. It might be true. I don't know. Some people speculate that the word brioche is derived from the French slang for a mistake. Also, I did not find that substantiated. Another reference that I don't think is the right one is that it could be referencing a brioche dinner roll, which is formed in two pieces, one placed on top of the other. Because brioche knitting is where you knit the same row twice. So the two pieces of the brioche, that's why it was connected. So I'm peeling back the onion thinking, okay, I'm just not finding any substantiation for this. So I find out, of course, we all know Nancy Marchant is the one who standardized brioche knitting. She came up with the abbreviations. She kind of wrote the book on brioche knitting. She's like the resident expert on this stitch. I always thought that brioche knitting and fisherman's rib were the same. They are worked completely differently, but some references, some books will say, oh, if you've done fisherman's rib, you've done brioche. They're the same, but they're not exactly the same because of the way that they are worked. Earliest reference to the brioche stitch is from 1842 in Frances Lambert's Handbook of Needlework. And this came into popularity because under Queen Victoria, the cult of domesticity became a thing. Okay, I'm gonna put up some pictures of a very popular cushion that was called a brioche. And if you see it, you'll know why. It looks just like a pastry of some sort. This brioche pillow, brioche cushion, was very popular around this time during the Victorian period because of this cult of domesticity. I'm reading this from Knitstoria, which is a blog online. The popularity of a knitted cushion or footstool in the 1840s and 50s reflected the cult of true womanhood, sometimes called the cult of domesticity, which was an ideology prevalent during the Victorian era. So Queen Victoria becomes queen in 1937, and she makes domesticity central to her exercise of power. Women were expected to maintain a family and home through cooking and cleaning and forego more frivolous or even intellectually challenging activities. Ladies' magazines across both sides of the Atlantic stressed the home as the sphere of womanhood and represented women as content as the matriarch of their private realm. And here is a picture from Godey's Lady's Book from March of 1850, and the picture is called The Sphere of Woman. And you can see she is in a very comfortable place, working on some kind of needlework with her children, and it's very homey and domestic. Here is a painting by Eastman Johnson called The Hatch Family from 1870-71 that's at the Met, and you have to kind of look for it, but there is a footstool in this painting that is a brioche, and it's just something that was super popular around this time. So by 1857, the brioche cushion from the Godey's Lady Book was the thing. It was the thing. By calling brioches Turkish cushions, the Victorian era interior design reflected the reaches of colonialism with an interest in the exotic romanticism of far-off regions. Americans had an opportunity to see international interiors with the 1876 Centennial Exposition. So this is like the home show of 1876. Home design evolved to include a Turkish or cozy corner. Here is a picture of what that looked like. This was either a niche or sometimes a second parlor, but the decor emphasized soft furnishings and was intended for more private conversation. If you've ever read The Sign of Four by Sherlock Holmes, the one guy with the high squeaky voice, I forget his name, but he has a house like this. His whole house is like this. Like he has a hookah and it's all just decorated in this kind of Turkish style, which was considered very homey and comfortable. And he was kind of agoraphobic, I think. Like he didn't really like to leave the house. And so you could see why a guy like that would have very comfortable, kind of very trendy design in his house at the time. So that photograph that I showed was a 19th century photograph of a Turkish corner. I got a lot of this from Knitstoria. She did a lot of really good digging on this topic. So if you want to read more about it, Google Knitstoria and brioche and Turkish corner, and you can find more details on that. In 1895, they're kind of looking back on this as, you know, like we would say, oh, back in 2000, we did such and such. Back in 1895, they're looking back on it, and they, here is an example of a child's Scotch cap that was reminiscent of these brioche pillows. So it seems that the brioche stitch was used in creating these cushions and these pillows. And then later in things that were reminiscent of it, such as the hat. So interesting. So it's because these cushions were called brioches and they looked like a brioche, like they look like a bun or a pastry, and the stitch used to make them was then called the brioche stitch. So interesting. Let's see. So in 1842, Mary Thomas, I'm backing up a little bit because I have notes in several places. In 1842, Mary Thomas's Book of Knitting Patterns gave directions for the brioche stitch, as well as a Turkish brioche, which was slightly different, which was also known as shawl stitch, reverse lace stitch, oriental rib stitch, and English stitch. Elizabeth Zimmerman talked about the brioche stitch in her 1960s book called Wool Gathering, and she called it prime rib, which is kind of cute because it does look like a form of ribbing. Now, in her 2009 book, Nancy Marchant said that Dutch knitters had one word to describe both the fisherman's rib and the brioche stitch, and they called it patensteek. So that was the word that Dutch knitters used for both of those things because they do look almost identical. In these swatches, you can see that in the first swatch, it is an example of the Nancy Marchant brioche. Swatches 2 and 3 are two different ways of working the fisherman's rib. Very, very similar, but not identical. According to Interweave magazine, brioche achieves the doubling horizontally. So you end up with a stitch that you see in the front and one behind it. and that goes horizontally. But fisherman's rib, it ends up to be more vertical. And that makes sense considering that you're working it horizontally with brioche, whereas with fisherman's rib, you're going back and working that stitch vertically. Fisherman's rib has the higher tension. So that's going to make a tighter knit, which makes sense because a fisherman's rib would happen on a fisherman's sweater, which needed to be very warm. Okay, so it's a lot of layers, but the basic reason why we call brioche stitch goes back to this brioche cushion in the Victorian period. Now, when you're working a brioche stitch or a fisherman's rib, you want to go down between 2 and 4 needle sizes, depending, smaller than you would use for stockinette. Because of the way this is worked, you end up with a very airy fabric. So in order to get it a little bit denser, you want to downsize your needles a little bit. Measuring gauge in brioche can be a little bit challenging. You have to remember that each V is 2 rows. You can work brioche in either 1 or 2 colors. You can increase and decrease, and you can work cables in brioche. If you've done brioche knitting before, you'll know it's a lot of fun. It comes with its downsides in that if you make a mistake, it's harder to fix. I think that's probably the biggest thing. It is a little bit harder to measure gauge. There are tons of online workshops for how to work both 1 and 2 color brioche. So if you want to learn how to do that, you can very easily do that on YouTube. One thing that Erin of Knitstoria mentioned that I thought was super interesting is she draws a parallel between this period of Victorian history, this cult of domesticity, and what happened in the 2000s with the Hygge, Hygge, which I did look up how to pronounce that, and that is pronounced in English as Hygge, which refers to just the cozy hominess of home. And she likens the knitted brioche to those big knitted poofs that we had in the 2000s around that time of Hygge. And, you know, in 2020, we also got very homey because we were all home all the time. So, rolling from that into this week's topic, I want to talk about our favorite things to knit. Kind of going back to that Hygge, that being at home and our needlework and our children and cooking and comfort. What are your favorite things to knit? I really thought about what I like to work on, and I primarily enjoy knitting sweaters and socks. Those are probably my 2 favorite things. I love stockinette. I love color work. I like interesting repeats that are easy to memorize. I don't really enjoy blankets. And I think partly that's because I like to wear my knitting. I like fashion design more than blanket design. Also, even a sweater, which is a big project, is a smaller project than a blanket. Like a blanket is a big project. One other thing that I wanted to share that it's Grand Central in here today. I'm telling you what. That I wanted to share is that I am going to be offering some luxury yarns. Very excited. I've got some sample skeins coming. I'm going to be trying those out and deciding on which ones I want to offer you. But anyway, rolling along from Hygge and not enjoying knitting blankets, my knitting fantasies for this week is all blankets. So I have been wanting forever and ever and ever to make one of those gigantic yarn blankets. So I found this one on Etsy. There's a kit for it. It's kind of pricey. Even on sale, it's pricey. It's $185, but you get, presumably, I think it might just be the yarn and the pattern because this lady is using her hands to knit the stitches, which you can totally do if you are using yarn of this size because it is just so huge. But I would love to make one of those. Wouldn't that be so awesome to have in your house? I guess the downside is that you are using a single ply roving, I guess. It's kind of like a roving that would pretty easily pill, I think. Has anybody done one of these? If you have, let me know how it's worked out for you because I would love to make one of these, but it is very pricey. And in my house, it would take a beating. I feel like an acrylic would be a better place to start in my home with my people who are here all the time and children and whatnot, rather than like a luxury wool yarn. That's maybe for the retirement years. When my grandchildren come over, I can put it away. So that's my first pick. My second pick, I only have two for today, is an American flag blanket by the Knitting Niche. I have used the word niche twice in this podcast, and that's a word I almost never use. But I just really liked this. I did not dig too deeply into it. Looks like intarsia for the stars, but I'm pretty sure that the stripes are just knit in garter stitch. This is knit with chunky yarn on size 11 needles. And when you're done, you get an American flag blanket that is 35 inches by 65 inches. So about 3 feet by 5.5 feet. So that's a good size blanket. Might leave your feet uncovered, but maybe for a smaller person or just as like a couch blanket, I think that would be really cool. Okay, so here's what happened. I have a lovely video story from a podcast watcher named Dora, and she tells a wonderful story of how knitting brought her together with someone who really, really needed her. Here's Dora.
Hey everybody, I'm Dora, and I live in Huntersville, North Carolina, which is just a few miles north of Charlotte. And I've been knitting for about 12 years. And I wanted to share with you a story or just one example of how knitting can bring people together. So I'm a 2-time cancer survivor, and in December of 2020, I was sitting in the oncologist's office because I had to have a scan, and you have to drink this liquid and then wait for 30 minutes and have your scan. So while I was waiting, I was knitting on a hat, and a woman and her husband were in the waiting area with me, and she came up to me and introduced herself as Rosemary, and her husband was Rusty, and she asked what I was knitting. So I told her and showed her the pattern, and she said that she liked it. And so we struck up a conversation and we exchanged contact information. And a couple of days later, I hadn't called her back just to chat with her. So a couple of days later, the oncologist's office called me and said, Rosemary called us and would like us to call you to tell you to call her. So I called her, and we had a very long, very nice conversation, a couple of hours. And it was interesting because we had knitting in common. We had music in common. She is a singer, and her husband was a music teacher, and they were retired, and she has a daughter maybe 5 years younger than me. And we also had, of course, cancer in common. She said that she had been fighting for 3 years, and she was on her 12th different chemo drug, and she had been fighting myeloma, I believe. And so we had just a really lovely conversation. She had it on speakerphone because the cancer had gone to her brain and was causing a lot of brain fog. And so her husband, Rusty, was trying to fill in some of her words for her when she couldn't find them. And so we just had a really nice conversation. She was talking about how she was in the middle of crocheting a blanket for her daughter that was inspired by sunflowers. And so she said that she was working on that when she was able to, when she felt like it. So I didn't hear from her for a couple of days, and then she sent me an email and said, sorry, I haven't been in touch, but this latest chemo is kicking my butt. And so I just let her be. I didn't call her or anything. And a couple of weeks later, I heard from her husband, and she had passed away about 2 days after the email conversation with me, and 3 or 4 days after our phone conversation. So he, in his email, he asked if I first would be interested in any of her knitting supplies and yarn, because the other thing that we had in common was that she had been part of a prayer shawl ministry at her church, and I had created and led a prayer shawl ministry at my church for 9 years, and so we had that in common too. So I told Rusty that I would come and look at it, and if I couldn't use it, I would donate it to my prayer shawl ministry. And the other question that he had was if I would be willing to finish the blanket that she was crocheting for her daughter. And of course I said yes. So we arranged a time to meet, and I went to his house. And when I got there, he said that Rosemary's daughter, Abby, really wanted to meet me, and that she was on her way. And so Abby came in and immediately hugged me and said, I was at a meeting at my children's school, and Rusty told me that you were coming, and I just had to meet you. And so I was a little taken aback, because I didn't think that my meeting with Rosemary was that impactful. It was just, a conversation that we struck up, and we had so much in common, but I didn't really think that much of it. But she said when I got off the phone, when Rosemary got off the phone, she called me right after and said, I think I met my sister tonight. And the other thing was that Abby said that Rosemary wasn't that social. She didn't make a lot of friends. She didn't make conversation. Abby, Rosemary's daughter, didn't know that much about her, and knew very little about her past before Abby was born. So she just wasn't that open. She wasn't that social. And I didn't get that impression at all, because we just hit it off and had a great conversation. And so it was really, really special, that meeting with Abby and Rosemary's husband, Rusty. So I got the blanket pieces, and I crocheted the blanket, and it was a little sad, because I could see where the cancer had started to deteriorate or affect her brain, because a lot of the squares didn't match the pattern and didn't match each other. And so I really kind of had to just piecemeal it together. She had done all of the squares. She had made them all. And I just had to seam them together and weave in the ends and all that. So she had done the majority of the work. So it wasn't perfect, but Abby understood that, her mom was making it for her during a very difficult time, and it was still very special to her. So I finished it up about a month later, and Abby came and picked it up, and she so appreciated it. So fast forward about a year, and in January of this year, my birthday is in January, and so people on Facebook were wishing me a happy birthday. And so I heard from Abby, Rosemary's daughter, and she said, I have to take you to lunch for your birthday. And so we went to lunch, and she had brought me an orchid, which was Rosemary's favorite flower, and it was so sweet. And the other thing that she said, you're not going to believe this, but Rosemary's birthday is also January 10th. And so we have the same birthday too. So we had all of that in common, and would have had such a nice friendship had she lived longer. She would have been a very good friend. But out of that grew a friendship with her daughter, who was, similar age, and it was just lovely. And that was all because Rosemary approached me when I was knitting a hat, and we had that in common. So I just wanted to share that. Knitting in public, I just wanted to share that story with you in hopes that you'll strike up a conversation with someone if you see them knitting, and maybe a friendship can grow out of it. Thanks very much.
Isn't that story just so beautiful? I feel like for me, I need to remember not to overlook anyone. Like it would be easy to have met someone and then just go on with your life. But Dora gave this woman her number, and they promised to meet later, and they did, and they developed this great friendship. And then after she died, she was still friends with her daughter. Wow, just what a story. And to pay attention to people who need you in that moment and to be there for them if you can. I just thought that was a lovely story. Thank you so much, Dora. If you have a knitting story that you would like to share on the podcast, my first choice is a video because I love seeing people's faces. You can take it on your iPhone or your Samsung phone or whatever you have. You can just prop your phone up, turn the camera around, take a video, and then send it to me. Some people have had a hard time sending a video, so you can put it on Google Drive or Dropbox or something like that and send it to me. Also, an audio file, or you can just write it out and I will read it for you. But I would love to hear your stories. Thank you so much for joining me this week, and I will see you next time. Bye, knitters.